Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a pretty heavy topic, but a really important one. The recent stampede at the New Delhi Railway Station.
Yeah, definitely a tragedy. And, especially for our UPSC aspirants out there, this incident really brings up some crucial themes.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, you've got governance, disaster management, public safety, all things that could be huge EE for your mains exam. And
Right.
hey, who knows, maybe even the prelims.
Exactly. We're going to go beyond just the headlines, though, really dig into the systemic issues that kind of contributed to this whole thing.
So think of it like a case study.
Yeah, like a case study and what went wrong, but more importantly, like what needs to change, How do we prevent this?
Okay, so let's try to picture ourselves at the New Delhi Railway Station. It's February 15th. The place is packed. Announcements are blaring everywhere.
Yeah.
And then suddenly,
Oh, man, just a massive surge of people.
yeah, total chaos erupts.
It's just heartbreaking to even imagine, the fear and the panic that people must have felt.
And for us as UPSC aspirants, we have to analyze this. What triggered this chaos?
Right. So on the surface, it might seem like, okay, it was just a sudden influx of passengers for, a special train.
Right.
But the real issue is much deeper. There are systemic lapses in crowd management.
Systemic lapses. Okay, we hear that term a lot. What does that actually mean in this context?
Think of it like a river, right? A river flowing smoothly,
Wow.
but then you force that river through like a super narrow channel. What happens?
It gets turbulent,
Exactly. It becomes chaotic, dangerous.
like rapids.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's what happened here. Instead of a smooth flow of people, you had bottlenecks, not enough security personnel, and just a complete communication breakdown.
It's almost like they were caught totally off guard.
Hmm.
But the source mentions that the control room, they had CCTV access,
Right. They could see what was happening.
but they didn't act. Not enough security personnel, poorly placed barricades. It's like this was just waiting to happen.
And this wasn't some, unforeseen event. The railways themselves, they announced the movement of over 15 lakh passengers. They knew this was coming.
So why weren't they prepared? I mean, the source even says they handled Chafucha crowds effectively. If they can handle that, why not this?
That's the million-dollar question right there.
Right.
The fact that they have managed big crowds before just shows that there's a lack of consistent planning and preparedness. And that's a huge red flag when it comes to, public safety.
And then there's the whole blame game. The source even points out how Indian Railways is trying to kind of deflect responsibility, blaming passengers for last-minute ticket purchases.
It's like they're saying it's not our fault, it's the passengers who didn't behave predictably.
Yeah, which is just crazy to me.
Right.
And this isn't the first time we've seen this either.
Oh, absolutely. Remember the Elphinstone Road Stampede?
Oh, yeah?
Or the one in Allahabad during Kumbh Mela? It's a recurring pattern.
So what are they doing about it this time? Are they investigating?
Well, yeah, but get this, they're investigating themselves.
Wait, they're investigating themselves. How can that be impartial?
Exactly. It undermines the entire investigation. This brings up some pretty big questions about transparency and accountability. For those of you aiming for the UPSC, this ties right into the concept of the rule of law in India, which is a major theme in polity and governance.
And it doesn't stop there. The source also mentions contradictory statements from authorities, a rush to offer compensation before even confirming the death toll. It all just seems so chaotic and kind of insensitive.
It definitely raises concerns about transparency and accountability. If you can't trust the authorities to be upfront and take responsibility, it just erodes public faith and raises questions about their legitimacy. For UPSC aspirants, this links back to the concept of legitimacy in governance, a key theme you want to understand thoroughly.
It's almost like they're more focused on damage control than addressing the root causes.
Yeah, and they're even blaming fake news for the stampede.
Oh, come on, seriously.
Yeah.
Didn't they use that same excuse during previous railway tragedies?
Yeah, they did. It points to a larger issue, though. This tendency to blame external factors instead of acknowledging internal failures.
Like they're scared to take responsibility.
Exactly. And that's a dangerous mindset for any Y organization, especially one responsible for public safety.
It's frustrating. Because how can they learn from their mistakes if they won't even acknowledge them in the first place?
Right. It creates this vicious cycle. Tragedy strikes, blame is shifted, no real lessons are learned, and then it happens all over again. This brings us to a concept called institutional inertia.
Institutional inertia.
Okay.
Break that down for me.
Imagine like a giant ship trying to change course.
Okay.
It's slow, cumbersome, resistant to change. That's basically what institutional inertia is. Large organizations like Indian Railways, they often resist change even when it's obviously needed.
So they know there are problems, but they're just too stuck in their ways to fix them.
Yeah. in a way. And it's not always intentional. Sometimes it's bureaucracy, sometimes lack of resources, sometimes just fear of the unknown.
Mm.
But the result is the same failure to adapt and improve. And for our UPSC folks, this concept of institutional inertia pops up in public administration questions all the time.
Mm.
It's essential for understanding why organizations, especially government ones, can be so slow to change.
So we've got this pattern of tragedies, lack of accountability, and now this institutional inertia. It's a lot to unpack, but I think we're starting to get a clearer picture of what led to this tragic event.
Exactly. We've just scratched the surface, though. We'll dig deeper into the aftermath of the tragedy, explore the blame game further, and discuss potential solutions in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks, because this is where it gets really interesting. We'll be back after a short break to continue our deep dive into the new Delhi Railway Station Stampede. And don't forget, we're relying on a fantastic piece from The Hindu for this episode, so kudos to them for their in-depth reporting. So we talked about the blame game, right?
Yeah.
And how Indian Railways is pointing fingers at fake news as a factor in the stampede. But honestly, it just feels like a convenient excuse to me.
Yeah, it's a tactic we've seen before, and it raises some serious questions about accountability and transparency. They're basically arguing that rumors about a platform change caused the panic, and then that led to the stampede. But even if there were rumors, that doesn't mean they're not responsible for passenger safety.
Right. It's like saying, well, we didn't think people would misunderstand announcements in a crowded, chaotic environment. Shouldn't that be a given?
Absolutely. This line of reasoning is dangerous because it shifts the blame from the authorities. You know,
Right.
the ones who are supposed to ensure public safety onto the individuals who often end up being the victims.
It's like adding insult to injury for the victims and their families. Instead of focusing on real solutions, they're trying to deflect responsibility by blaming something as vague as fake news.
And this blame game sets a dangerous precedent. If fake news becomes the go-to excuse for every systemic failure, it creates this culture of impunity. It discourages real investigation, and it prevents any meaningful reforms from happening.
So what's the solution then? If this blame game is a recurring problem, how do we break this cycle of tragedy and inadequate response? I mean, we have to look beyond just pointing fingers.
The source actually offers some good insights into potential areas for change. First and foremost, there needs to be a real, genuine commitment to passenger safety. And I don't just mean saying it. It needs to be reflected in everything they do, from infrastructure to crowd management protocols to emergency response plans.
It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Right.
Instead of waiting for things to go wrong and then scrambling to respond, they need to anticipate potential problems and take steps to prevent them.
Exactly, and that requires a significant cultural shift within the organization. They need to move away from this blame-shifting mentality and embrace a culture of accountability.
Which brings us back to the investigation. If they're serious about getting to the bottom of this and preventing future tragedies, they need a truly independent and transparent inquiry.
100%. An investigation led by an external agency, not the railways themselves. It needs to be thorough, impartial, and the findings need to be made public.
The source mentions that train accidents are investigated by the Commissioner of Railway Safety. But this stampede is being investigated internally. Why the difference?
That's a great point. It suggests that there's a double standard when it comes to investigating different types of railway incidents. And for our UPSC folks, this kind of discrepancy speaks volumes about the challenges of ensuring accountability within large bureaucratic organizations. It's a key theme in public administration.
It makes you wonder if they're really interested in finding the truth and making real changes, or if it's more about protecting themselves and their image.
It's a valid concern. This situation brings up those questions about transparency and the pursuit of justice. Remember the principles of natural justice and due process we mentioned before. Those are being compromised here. And for the UPSC, this ties directly into the concept of the rule of law in India.
So bringing it back to our listeners,
Right.
What's the takeaway here? What's the so what of this whole discussion?
The new Delhi Railway Station Stampede is a stark reminder that the issues within Indian Railways go way beyond just this one incident. It's a wake-up call for greater accountability, proactive safety measures, and a real commitment to transparency and reform.
And for our UPSC aspirants, this incident is a gold mine of information. It's a case study in analyzing administrative failures, understanding disaster management, and critically evaluating the government's response. Themes that show up all the time in both the prelims and mains exams.
Use this deep dive as a starting point. Dig deeper into past railway tragedies, look at the recommendations made after those incidents, and analyze how, or even if, those recommendations were actually implemented.
Don't just accept everything you read. Think critically, ask questions, connect the dots.
Exactly. And don't forget about those broader concepts we've discussed: accountability, institutional inertia, the role of the media, the importance of transparency. These are all interconnected and relevant for a wide range of UPSC topics.
Okay, so we've dissected the problems. What about solutions? What concrete steps can we take to prevent these tragedies from happening again? This is a question we should all be asking ourselves, not just as aspiring civil servants, but as concerned citizens.
That's the most crucial part of our deep dive, the way forward. And it's a multifaceted challenge.
So we know that preventing these tragedies isn't about just blaming fake news. We need real solutions. So how do we actually make our railways safer? Where do we even start?
Well, it's a multi-pronged approach, right? We need to improve the infrastructure itself, come up with better crowd management strategies, and completely overhaul the safety culture within Indian Railways.
Okay, so it's like a three-legged stool.
Exactly. Yeah. 3 legs, and they all need to be strong.
Okay, let's break it down. What kind of infrastructural improvements are we talking about, specifically?
Think about like the platform design itself. Clear signage, designated entry and exit points to minimize those bottlenecks, proper lighting so people can see where they're going, even things like wider footbridges. All of that makes a huge difference, especially during rush hour or, big events.
So it's about designing for safety from the beginning, not just reacting after something bad happens.
Exactly. And then there's crowd management, which isn't just about having a ton of security personnel. You need well-trained staff who can anticipate problems, understand how crowds behave, and react quickly in emergencies. They need to be able to make decisions on the fly.
Yeah, the source mentioned the control room had CCTV, but didn't actually do anything. It seems like communication and coordination were a problem too.
Absolutely. You need clear lines of communication, real-time monitoring systems that can alert staff to potential issues, and give them the authority to act quickly. And regular training and drills are essential too. You can't expect people to know what to do in a crisis if they've never practiced it.
It's like a sports team. You need a coach, a good game plan, and lots of practice.
Perfect analogy. And speaking of game plan, having a solid disaster management plan is critical. This should include everything from crowd control protocols and evacuation procedures to medical response plans. And it all needs to be regularly reviewed and updated based on what they've learned from previous incidents, both the good and the bad.
So it's about constantly learning and adapting. Got it.
Exactly. Every tragedy is a tough lesson, but it's an opportunity to learn and prevent future ones. But that learning can only happen if there's a real culture of open and honest assessment. And that brings us to what I think is the most important thing, a fundamental change in the safety culture within Indian Railways.
Okay, let's talk about that. What does a change in safety culture actually look like? How do we move beyond just talk and actually make things happen?
It starts with accountability. When things go wrong, and they will, in any big organization, there needs to be a thorough investigation, and people need to be held responsible. This shows that safety is the top priority, and negligence won't be tolerated.
But it also means letting employees speak up about safety concerns without being afraid of getting in trouble, right? Creating an environment where people feel comfortable reporting potential hazards, even if it means questioning their superiors.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility for safety. Everyone from the top down needs to feel like they can contribute to making things safer.
And it's not just about protecting passengers, right? It's about protecting the railway staff, too. They're the ones putting themselves at risk in these situations.
You're right. Their safety and well-being should be a top priority, too. They're the ones on the front lines making sure the railways run smoothly and safely.
So to wrap this all up, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this deep dive?
The New Delhi Railway Station Stampede was a tragedy that could have been prevented. And while there's no quick fix, there are definite steps we can take to make our railways safer. It requires a commitment from everyone involved: the government, the railway authorities, the employees, and even the passengers.
It's a shared responsibility. We all have a role to play in making our railways safe and efficient. And for our UPSC aspirants, this incident is a reminder that these real-world issues, they aren't just abstract concepts you memorize for an exam. They're complex challenges that require critical thinking, in-depth analysis, and the ability to see things from different perspectives.
And that's why we do these deep dives. To go beyond the headlines, untack these complex issues, and give our listeners the knowledge and skills they need to make a difference in the world. Whether you're aiming for the civil services or just want to be a more informed citizen, understanding these issues is crucial.
So keep those comments and questions coming. We love hearing from you and learning from your insights. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the issues that matter most. We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay safe.
And a reminder that our source for this episode was The Hindu. Keep reading, folks. It's one of the best ways to stay informed and prepare for the UPSC exam.